Thanks for coming in. What kind of impact would sanctions have, for example?
I think none whatsoever. I think let's not forget that Syria is already the subject of American sanctions, including aid restrictions and export bans, precisely due to its presence on Washington's list of states sponsors of terrorism. So the further sanctions will not deter a sinister regime to pursue its unrelenting and bloody crackdown on its own people.
The opposition seems well organised. The communications between different groups of activists seems, at least so far, to have been effective. How is that being achieved?
Well, in fact, it's an interesting paradox here, because the government lifted the ban on Facebook earlier as a tokenistic measure to allow more liberties in the country, and this tool precisely allowed activists to organise themselves better in order to demonstrate, and it's also what's allowing the rest of the world to know what's happening in Syria through the messages and reports that are coming across to Western countries through YouTube and the use of social media in general. So thanks to ordinary citizen and citizen journalism, in fact, we are aware of what's going on.
How determined then, can you tell from the messages that are getting out, is the opposition to continue? Because a lot of people are, so it seems, dying in pursuit of this change, if not of the regime, at least of the way that they're governed.
Well, they're very determined indeed, and they're also very aware of the double standards of the international community. Let's not forget that what led the UN to interfere militarily in Libya is a fear of troops going in major cities and start killing people, and that's exactly what is happening in Syria, and yet the international community is very cautious and indeed silent about it, and the Syrians are now hoping that the West is indeed going to ask for President al-Bashar to go.
Is there any protests being mounted outside the UN? Is anybody inside the UN trying to get some kind of resolution brought before the Security Council?
Well, there have been talks, statements issued by various governments criticising the level of onslaught that's going on in Syria, talks about implementing further economic sanctions on the regime, but no mention of any UN resolution to be discussed in that to deal with the crackdown.
So if sanctions wouldn't have any effect, if there's unlikely to be any UN coordinated action, what comes next?
Well, I think it's our job to push journalists, ordinary citizens, people who are reporting on what's going on, to put pressure on the international community, because what's happening in Syria makes an absolute mockery of what we're doing in Libya.
Thanks so much indeed, Nabila Ramdani. And routinely, when we cover this story, we do ask for comment from the Embassy of Syria in the UK and from the Syrian government, and occasionally we get it. In this case, we haven't.